Um, so did we talk about Tom's talking about who he was? Yes? Okay. Good, because I'm afraid that was going to really back us up. So we don't really know who Tom is. I have a theory. I think I mentioned it the other day. But even later on in the book, we're going to have others talk about Tom, but they're not going to say who he is. They're just going to say, the ring has no power over him, things like that. Page 146. So we're going to skip a bunch. Tom warns them, beware of the Barrow. When you go across the Barrow Downs, because they have to go across the Barrow Downs to leave Tom Bombadil's, whatever you want to call the area that he lives in, his domain, something, to make their way to the east-west road, which will take them to Bree. He warns them against the standing stones. The barrows look like this, and then there's a stone standing on top of them. The barrows are funeral or funerary barrows where people were buried thousands of years ago after a deadly battle. Fog comes, they get lost, they find themselves next to one of these stones. Frodo gets taken first and then the others. And they all get captured by what's called a Barrow Wight. The Wight part, W-I-G-H-T, just means creature. It's an Old English word, or it's an English word. It goes back to Old English. And it really just means person, okay? So a Barrow person. What kind of person lives in this thing? It's a ghost, essentially. It's a disembodied spirit, okay? So all four of them get captured. And Merry and Pippin are tied up, and Sam's tied up, and Frodo's kind of tied up. But Frodo has enough of his wits about him that he thinks, let me back up for just a moment. Page 141, bottom of the page. He thinks of escape. Frodo realizes he could escape if he wanted to. Okay. If he put on the ring, Barrow wouldn't catch him. He'd feel bad for Merry Sippin and Pam, or Merry Pippin and Sam, however you want to change their names. But at the same time that this courage awakens in him, he thinks of his friends and thinks, I can't leave them aside. So he remembers what Tom Bombadil taught them, what song to sing that will, be like an alarm to attract him. So Tom comes and rescues him. And they kind of recount some of the things they saw. Merry says, for example, page 143, the men of Khazad-dum came on us at night, and we were worsted. The spear in my heart. And he's like, wait, what am I talking about? I wasn't there. Where did you get to, Frodo? And Frodo, says, I don't want to talk about that. So Tom comes, top of 146. What does he do? Well, he rescues the hobbits, gets them out of the barrow. He kind of opens up the barrow. We're not told exactly how. It's not like he has a wand or he knows magic spells per se, but he opens up the barrow and he brings everything out. He exposes it to the sunlight. And he gives each of the hobbits a weapon. Old knives are long enough. This is top of page 146. Old knives are long enough as swords for hobbit people. Sharp blades are good to have if Shire folk go walking east, south, or far away into dark and danger. Kind of like, what are you guys doing? Here you are going off on this dangerous adventure, and none of you is armed. Hello? He told them that these blades were forged many long years ago by men of Westernessa. They were foes of the Dark Lord, but they were overcome by the evil king of Khazad-dum in the land of Angmar. Okay? Evil men of Khazad-dum in the land of Angmar. Have we heard the name Angmar before? Yes, we have. Gandalf talked about the Witch King of Angmar. And Tom Bombadil talked about it because he talked about when he was reciting the history/stories and the hobbits were fading in and out of consciousness, he mentioned them. Okay? So he gives them swords made by the men of Westerosi that were made for fighting against these forces. Okay? Now this is extremely, extremely important. Because one of these swords is going to be used much, much later. Well, they're all kind of going to be used, but one of them is going to be used in a very specific fashion by a very specific person. And while it's not directly spelled out, it's somewhat implied. If it had been, a Hobbit-made blade, wouldn't have done any good. But the very fact that it was made to battle against these enemies is why it had the effect it later has. Okay? So, they get all their gear, what they have left, packed back up, and Tom says, I'm going to go with you to the east-west road. We're not going to take anything more to chance. So he gets them to the east-west road, and he points down the road and goes, go this direction, stay on the road, and you'll get to Bree. Cool. So they get to Bree. Chapter 9, at the sign of the prancing pony. They stop. Before they go through, what does Tom tell Frodo he should do? Use a different name. Okay. So they go to the prancing pony. Bartleman Barber meets them, gives them rooms, and puts them up for the evening. It says, there's people meeting in the common room. They kind of like to meet, talk. We don't get a lot of news from the Shire, blah, blah, blah. Frodo's like, I don't know that that's such a good idea, but they decide to. So the four of them go into the common room, and who starts getting wasted? Pippin. Okay? Frodo goes and sits in the back corner, and he sits next to this guy. They're in the shadows kind of thing. And he watches Pippin, and Pippin starts to talk about Frodo and Bilbo's birthday party. And he's getting to the part about Bilbo disappearing. And the guy sitting next to Frodo goes, you better shut him up. It's not good to talk about. And Frodo jumps up, knocks Pippin aside, and he starts dancing on the table. Kind of what he thinks he's, 3 sheets to the wind. He starts dancing, singing a song about the man in the moon, the cat and the fiddle. Tolkien just weaves together, old nursery rhymes kind of a thing. And he finishes his song, and he puts his hands in his pockets, and the ring is positioned just so that it goes over one of his fingers. It doesn't have to be a ring finger. It can be any finger, okay? And he disappears, knocks the table over, dishes go flying, everybody's freaked out, and he scurries under the other tables and pops up next to Strider again, okay? Now, bear in mind something we did not talk about at all is what is a characteristic of hobbits, even those without magic rings? They can move very silently, very quietly, and they can, it's almost like make themselves invisible. If they don't want to be seen, they won't be seen. I don't mean like a hobbit could walk right through here and not be seen, but, if moving around, you wouldn't notice, okay? So he gets up next to Strider, and they're like, where'd he go? Where'd he go? And he's like, I'm right here. I fell, and I just went under the tables, and nothing, sinister, okay? And Strider says to him, 161, top of the page, why did you do that? Worse than anything your friends could have said. You have put your foot in it, or should I say your finger? I don't know what you mean. Okay? So, chapter 10. Checker Strider. Strider tries to explain he's a friend. I'm here to help you. Bottom of 165. Well, top of 165. He says, I know who these raiders are. Talking about the black raiders. I know who these raiders are. I've dealt with them before, etc., etc. Mentions Bill Fernie, not to be trusted, evil, etc. And then the bottom of the page. He says, perhaps I know more about these pursuers than you do. You fear them, but you do not fear them enough yet. Tomorrow you will have to escape if you can. Strider, notice talking about himself in third person, Strider can take you by paths that are seldom trodden. Will you have him? And Sam stands up and goes, he says to be wary. He says to be cautious. And I say yes to that. Well, let's begin with him. He comes out of the wild. I had never heard no good of such folk. Okay. Has Sam met any such folk before? No. He knows something that's plain and more than I like. But it's no reason why we should let him go leading us out into some dark place, far from help. Okay? Barlow comes in. And what does he give to Frodo? A letter. When should he have given that or delivered that letter to Frodo? So what time of the year is it? What month is it? October. Why? Because it's not going to take them very long to get from Bree to Weathertop. It's like 3 or 4 days. It's early October because what happens on Weathertop happens on October 6th. We're going to be told. Okay? It's October. When should the letter have been delivered? Before July. Yeah. Probably back in June. Three months have gone by. Why didn't Parliament deliver it? Or have it delivered?
He said he got busy.
He's always busy. Okay. What else? What does busyness often do to people? Unless you note things down, write them down. It's like, if I go to a doctor or whatever, and they're like, you want to know, Kurt? I say, nope, I'm putting it here in my electronic brain. Because the old gray one doesn't hold water anymore. It just, I won't remember anything. Okay? He forgets. He's very forgetful. So he delivers it, and he apologizes and, kind of begs and scrapes for forgiveness and such. So Frodo reads the letter. Bartleman warns them about taking up with Strider. He goes, but, maybe you know best. Bottom of 168, Strider says, well, who would you have them take up with then? Bartleman? Fat innkeeper who only remembers his own name? Okay. They talk about the riders. And Strider says, they come from Mordor, Bartleman. Yes, if that name means anything to you, save us. Save us, Jesus. That's the worst news to come. So Frodo asks, are you willing to help us? He says yes. Okay. So they finally read the letter. And Gandalf says he's been delayed. He'll try to meet up with them when he can. Okay. And he mentions Strider. Page 170. Make sure it's the real Strider. There are many strange men on the roads. His true name is Aragorn. And then he writes a nice little poem. Like that. Make them feel better. Okay. Frodo, why didn't this bottom of 170? Why didn't you tell me you were Gandalf's friend at once? It would have saved time. Would it? Really? Would you have believed me? Would any of you have believed me? For all I knew, I had to persuade you to trust me without proofs. If I was to trust you, I didn't intend you to tell you all about myself at once. I had to study you first, make sure of you. Why? Because the enemy has set traps for me. What's that telling us? He's important. I'm not just some slob living out in the wild. Okay? So, 171, Sam says, How do we know you're the real Strider? You never mentioned Gandalf till this letter came out. Okay, now, Sam is not supposed to be the brightest bulb. He's pretty smart, though, when it comes to Frodo's protection. You might be a play-acting spy for all I can see, trying to get us to go with you. You might have done it in the real Strider, too. What did you say to that? That you are a stout fellow, Sam. But I'm afraid my only answer to you is this. If I had killed the real Strider, I could kill you, and I should have killed you already without so much talk. If I was after the ring, big giveaway, right? He's not supposed to know anything about the ring. I could have it now. And he stands up. And we're told, and he suddenly seems to grow taller. Well, he stands up. He is taller than he is when he's sitting. But that means when he stands up, it's like once he's standing, he goes, which they kind of also go, and they shrink down. And his eyes gleamed a light, keen and commanding. Throwing back his cloak, he laid his hand on the hilt of a sword. If only he had pulled the sword out, what would they do? It's a broken sword. What good are you going to do to that? Or with that, okay? So, Frodo says, I believed you were a friend before the letter came. You frightened me several times tonight, but not like the enemies, servants of the enemy would. I think rather his spies would have, I don't know, how would I put this? Seem fairer and feel fouler. Oh, I get it. I see what you mean. I look foul and feel fair. Now, what does he mean by look foul? Is he ugly? Dirty? Beat up? If you clean all the dirt off and have his hair done and have his nails done and everything, would he be beautiful? Would he be gorgeous and handsome? Would he look like Viggo Mortensen? No, he wouldn't. You could throw gallons of mud on Viggo Mortensen and he's still pretty. Okay? I'll give you my example of who I would cast. Sam Elliott. Look at a picture, go on IMDb, and look at a picture of Sam Elliott from the early 2000s. He's good looking, yes, but it's this rugged kind of, he's not male cover model good looking, but he's also like 6'6". And Aragorn is supposed to be long. I'm thinking, Reed Richards and X-Men. No, he's supposed to be tall. He's got long legs. The reason he's called Strider is because he goes about on his long legs, right? And he should be lanky. And Sam Elliott's got the greatest voice in the world for a character like Aragorn, okay? So, I look foul and feel fair. I get it. Okay, so I need a bath. Is that it? All that is gold does not glitter. Not all those who wander are lost. Now, did Frodo read the letter aloud? So Aragorn heard those lines. Strider, heard those lines. No, he didn't. So Frodo puts two and two together. He knows these lines. How does he know them? I didn't read them aloud. So the verses go to you. He goes, they go to my name. Now that's kind of cool. How come none of us have verses that go with our names? That imply something great and powerful about us. I won't say anything about you guys. It's because I'm not great and powerful. It's just, nobody. Okay? So, they spend the night in a different room. And what do they discover in the morning? The rooms where they were supposed to stay had been raided. The bolsters, the dummies that had been put in the bed, had been run through with swords and knives and such. Would have happened to them. And they don't get off till later in the day because they've got to, resupply and all that kind of stuff. And all the Bree kind of comes out and, have fun storming the castle. And they take a pony with them named Bill that Sam names, right? And we get a knife in the dark chapter. So they make their way to Weathertop. It's an old, destroyed fortress, embattlement on top of what had been a volcano. Weathertop is a mountain that looks like this. Okay? and it's got a few of the stones still up here. Takes them a couple days. They get there. One of the day on the way there, one of the evenings, they see lightning in the east, and Frodo has a dream, etc. We're going to hear a little bit more about that later if I talk about it. So page 185, Aragorn / Strider is telling them about Weathertop and such. Okay. And Sam suddenly, bottom of 185, starts chanting this song about Gil-galad. And then stops. Says, I don't know the rest. Bilbo taught him that. Okay. So they get there. They're on the top of Weathertop. And they look off out in the distance because it gives them a clear view. What do they see off in the distance on the road? I think it's 4 black marks, black riders coming. Aragorn's like, shoot, get out. Because if they can see them, what else? They can be seen. Because they're standing, what's behind them? It's like a white backdrop, the sky, okay? So Strider says, we shouldn't have done that. They go off to a little dell, like a hollow, in the side of the mountain to set up camp, build a fire. In 191, Merry asks, tell us of Gil-galad. Now, Gil-galad was an elf king, all right? I don't have his name written up there. I thought I did. And he says, do you know any more of that land that Sam would sing? He says, I do indeed. So does Frodo. Why? Because it has something to do with Frodo's errand. Okay. Frodo explains a little bit, and he starts to mention Mordor, and Strider cuts him off. Don't say that name when it's dark. And what else? Servants of that land are in the area. Because it'll be like, ding, ding, we're here, calling them out. So instead he sings them a song about, I've already got it. Luthien and Beren. Luthien Tinuvial and Beren. Beren, a great hero, human man. Luthien, the daughter, that's her name. The daughter of Thingol and Melian, who is a Maya. Okay? Thingol, king of the Wood Elves, has a little kingdom. This is way back in the first age of Middle Earth. These two marry, or whatever, and have a daughter named Luthien, fairest woman who's ever lived. Okay? Melian is a Maya. I don't know if you remember when I put up the other day. Maya are supernatural beings. You had back in the Silmarillion, Valar, before they were Valar, they were Ainur. The R indicates plural. Okay, a single one is an Ainu and then a Valar. And then you had the Maiar, a single one is Maya. Okay, so these are like the highest level of the gods. When they enter into the universe as we know it, the created world, what is just collectively called Arda, they become the Valar. You call them gods. Okay? Up here, they're like angelic beings in Tolkien's cosmology. And then you have so this is the first level, and this is the secondary level. These are like, less powerful gods, right? So Luthien's mother is one of these. And you've got male gods and female goddesses, and male Maiar and female Maiar, okay? So, he starts to tell the story about Luthien and Beren. Quick, not even a Cliff Notes version. Beren is out wandering around. I can't remember why. It's been years since I've read the Silmarillion. And he somehow finds his way into Thingol's kingdom, which is named Doriath, which is supposed to have like a force field around it to keep everybody out. But he gets through. And it's not like he comes in and speaks a magic word. He just walks right through it. And he sees Luthien dancing out in a glade. You know, like an opening in the woods, and the sun is shining right on her, and cue the nice classical music. And he sees her and he falls madly in love with her. And he speaks to her and she falls madly in love with him. Largely because she's never seen a man before. It's like, oh, a man. I know what those are for. And vice versa. They fall wildly in love. He goes to her father and says, I want to marry your daughter. And he's like, I'm going to cut your head off. Why? Because no man is good enough for my daughter. No man. Why? She's not human. She's elf. And how do you get a mixture between supernatural being and, whatever? She's elf and something else. No man's, and he's like, come on. I love her. She loves me. And he says, okay. You can marry my daughter when you bring me a Silmaril from the crown of Morgoth. Oh, I don't have time for this. We're so far behind already. That's essentially going into the lowest depths of hell where Satan reigns and taking off his baseball cap and bringing it to me. Okay? Silmarils were these jewels made by Fëanor, another elf, that captured the light of these two trees that were the light of the world before the sun and moon. So wait, back in time, right? And Morgoth made this crown and he put the Silmarils in it. And he always wears it because he doesn't sleep. He's a supernatural being. Morgoth was the highest of these. Or you could say co-highest because there was an equal. And that one became the highest of the gods of Valinor. Okay? And so Thingol says, bring me a Silmaril from Morgoth's crown. And Baron's like, man, you guys sell your daughters cheaply. That's all? You just want that? Not a problem. Okay? He gets it. Dies in the process, but he gets it. Okay? Dies, goes off. He's allowed to come back. He and Luthien marry. They have children. How do I know? Because that's their son. And from him, from them, come Elrond. Also from them come another line. Now I'll leave that. So he sings this song. All of that is important. Why? Go to the Wolvercote Cemetery outside Oxford today and go to Tolkien's grave. I ought to put this picture up on that. D12. And you will see John Ronald Reuel Tolkien, January 3rd, 1892 to, I can't remember the month and day, 1973. And beneath that, Baron. Edith Pratt Tolkien, her birth and death dates, Luthien. The love song, and if you go read it in the Silmarillion, it's a much, much longer tale than this. The love story of Baron and Luthien was Tolkien and his wife's love story. I mean, he kind of wrote it for her, and she was like, oh, John. I mean, she really liked it, apparently. So, what does this have to do with Frodo? I can't give it away. We're going to find out in Two Towers. Okay? Where Sam's going to go, oh my freaking, I can't believe this. We are back in this story. Because Frodo has something that was given to him that we'll talk about. No, not today. Maybe, what's today? Today's Tuesday. Maybe, oh, please God, Tuesday of next week. Okay? So, assuming we ever finish Fellowship of the Ring. So, the Black Riders come, and what does Frodo do? Puts on the ring. Why? Kind of. And he's thinking, going to make me invisible. Where do the Black Riders exist? What are the Black Riders? Let me put it that way.
Shadows.
Spirits, shadows, ghosts. The term Tolkien uses is wraiths. Okay? What did Gandalf tell Frodo, Shadow of the Past, would happen to any mortal who tried to possess a ring of power? It would possess him. And if he or she held it long enough, what would happen? That individual would fade completely and would exist kind of in the shadows, right? Would not be able to be seen here, but put on a ring and you'll see that individual clear as day. So Frodo's not thinking. He's thinking, here and now, ring will protect me if I put it on. He's not thinking, they want the ring. If I put the ring on, they'll see me clearly and I will see them clearly. See, because they don't see people here like in our physical realm. They don't see people clearly. They see people the way we see them, kind of vaguely. The only reason they can see the Black Riders is what? They're wearing dark cloaks. It doesn't matter that it's, black just for symbolism. They could have been red, brown, yellow, green, whatever color you want. They're covering their unseen existence. Okay? So that when the Black Riders' cloaks get destroyed, it's not like, oh, naked Black Riders. You don't see them. Okay? So Frodo gets stabbed. By which Black Rider? Fred? No. The captain of the Nine is the one who stabs Frodo. Who is the captain of the Nine? Who is the leader of the Black Riders? Who is the chief of the Nazgul? The Witch King of Angmar, Sauron's right-hand wraith. Can't call him man because he's not a man anymore. All right? These are the men, the 9 men, who Sauron gave rings of power to. And they wore them so much and they possessed them so long that they became totally owned and possessed by the rings and by Sauron. Okay? So, but just before Frodo gets stabbed, what does he do? He pulls out his little sword and he stabs the rider and says, where is it? 195. O Elbereth Gilthoniel. Elbereth, I'll go back here for a moment. She is the queen of the gods. You have in Valinor, which is where the Valar live, notice the Val, okay, which is where the Valar live, you have Manwë, the chief of the gods. We would probably call him what? Zeus, Jupiter, if you want. And you have Elbereth, the queen of the gods. Hera, what's the Roman version? Juno. Hera and Juno, okay? But she's not Hera or Juno. Tolkien kind of bases her almost in terms of the representation that we get here, which is not, okay, let me make this very, very clear. This is not in any way a Christian world. There is no understanding of quote-unquote God. There is no awareness of Jesus or the saints or anything at all. It is a pagan world. You die, you die. That's it. Especially if you're human. You rot in the ground. In Tolkien's Silmarillion, however, and some of the other writings, we get ideas of other things that might happen to humanity. Silmarillion talks about death as the gift of Eru-Ilúvatar to humanity. If it's a gift, that means there's got to be something good that comes out of it. Okay? Elbereth is often understood or taken to be symbolic of Mary. Blessed Virgin Mary. If you're Catholic, you pray to Mary. You can pray to other saints too, but that's your chief intercessor. All right? Tolkien was entirely Catholic. He called The Lord of the Rings fundamentally a Catholic and religious work. even though there's no Catholicism in it. We'll talk about how that can be. Okay? So, he cries out, Elbereth Gilthoniol. It's like, Hail Mary, full of grace, kind of a thing. And is wounded. Who, how do I put this? Partially heals him. Aragorn. Okay? He finds a plant called Athelas. He crushes up the leaves, boils it in some water. It makes this really nice fragrance, and it makes them all feel better, lifts their spirits and such. Okay? But it doesn't stop the disease. It doesn't stop the spread. And as they're making their way towards Rivendell, what is happening to Frodo? Getting weaker and weaker and weaker. Why? Because he's fading. Okay? So they make their way, and who meets up with them? About halfway. Unlike in the film. Legolas. Sorry, no, not Legolas. Glorfindel. Legolas is how do I want to put this? He's a lesser elf. He's a wood elf from the area up north. Glorfindel's from back here. Glorfindel remembers what the world was like before the world was bent. We'll talk about that if I didn't talk about that the other day. Yes, I did talk about it the other day, right? Because Tom says, I remember the world before it was bent. Okay? So does Glorfindel, right? So Glorfindel comes. He talks about their nine are abroad. We're like, yeah, we know. And he puts Frodo on his horse. And they realize some of the nine are coming up behind them, and some are trying to cut them off. Okay? And he speaks into the horse's ear, and the horse, flies like the wind. So Frodo and the horse make their way to what's called the Fords of Bruinen. Bruinen is the river. The ford is the place where they can cross it. Pages 214 and 15. Frodo rides across, and then he turns around. And he stands in his stirrups. He stands there, and we're told, page 214, right in the middle. The foremost rider, this is the captain of the nine, okay, rides out into the water. And Frodo says, go back. Go back to the land of Mordor and follow me no more. The riders halt, but Frodo had not the power of Bombadil. Because Bombadil says, not that, but Bombadil, disperses the Barrow. His enemies laugh and they say, come back to Mordor, we will take you. Go back. He whispers, the ring, they cry. And so the leader goes farther into the water. By Elbereth and Luthien the Fair. Okay? You shall have neither the ring nor me. Is that a prayer? No. It's what? It's a vow. It's like, if I have to. But that's not what he means. He just means, with the aid of Elbereth and Luthien the Fair, the only problem is, Elbereth no longer has any dealings in Middle-earth. Let me rephrase that. Overtly has any dealings. Okay? And the captain of the nine, who's now halfway across the ford, stands up in his stirrups and just raises his hand. And Frodo's little sword goes, poof, breaks. Okay, where did he get the sword? From the Barrow White. Tom Bombadil took it out. The sword was made for what purpose? To fight this guy. To fight these kings. These are former kings. These are the one in front is the Witch King of Angmar. This sword was created to help fight against him. And he just raises his hand and it breaks. And Frodo's tongue sticks to his mouth. In other words, he no longer has any power. And what happens right at that time? The water starts to rise. And Frodo sees a big wave. He sees points of light. This isn't George Bush's 1,000 points of light, coming to help him. He sees several points of light coming from behind. One really bright one. which we're going to talk about later. But the others are little swords. These are the swords that Tom Bombadil gave them. Okay? And Frodo passes out, seeing in the water these horsemen on steeds coming down in the water, and they wash the riders away. And he passes out. Book 2, Chapter 1. Frodo wakes up, and there's Gandalf sitting beside him. And Gandalf says, get the right name. Elrond's commanded that you aren't to ask any questions and nobody's to talk to you, etc., but I'm Gandalf. So there. Page 220. Okay? He says, but I'm awake and I got a lot of things I remember and things I need explaining. And why were you delayed? Where were you? He says, you're going to hear all that. I'll just say I was held captive. You? Yes, I, Gandalf the Grey, was held captive. Okay? So you knew about the riders. Yes. So did you. It's like, come on, Frodo, get up to speed, please. They're the ring race, the 9 servants of the Lord of the Rings. I did not know that they had arisen again, or I should have fled with you at once. In other words, when I left you in June, if I had known the 9 were abroad, I never would have left you. Okay? So he says, Aragorn saved us from disaster, and talks about Glorfindel. Bottom of 220. He says, Aragorn reminds me of you a lot. And he talks about, I didn't know that any of the big people were like that. I thought, well, they were just big and rather stupid. Kind and stupid like Butterbur, or stupid and wicked like Bill Ferny. Who did he mean big people?
You.
Us. Notice what he's just said. I didn't know any big people were like that. What's the that? You and Aragorn. I thought they were all just kind of big and stupid. Why? What is showing us Frodo? What is Frodo showing us, revealing to us about himself? What word could we use to describe him? That we can use to describe a lot of people who say things about people they never met or known. That's kind of a benign, nice way of putting it. Prejudiced. Why is he prejudiced against big people?
He doesn't know anything about them.
Because they're not in the Shire. Think of what that word prejudice, what it literally means. Prejudging. If you prejudge, that means you make a judgment without any information, which is why Gandalf corrects him. You don't know much even about them. Who's the them? Barleyman Butterbur, and Bill Ferny. If you think old Barleyman is stupid. Now, Barleyman comes across how? Kind of bumbling and stupid. He says he's not stupid. He is wise enough on his own ground. That is, in his realm, in his sphere, in his world, he's pretty wise. Right? He thinks less than he talks and slower. And I think Gandalf is giving us an understanding of what he means by wise. Man, if only our politicians would do this. He thinks less than he talks. Okay? And slower. It doesn't mean he doesn't think. Okay? It means he ponders. Yet he can see through a brick wall in time. Give him enough time. What does he mean by that metaphor? He sees through a brick wall. Really, is he like Superman? He just, sits there and bores through the wall. No, it means he'll come to the right answer eventually. It takes him a while. But there are a few left in Middle Earth like Aragorn. In other words, now, when you talk about Aragorn, you can't really put him in the same category as Barrow and Butterbur, right? It may be this War of the Ring will be their last adventure, because Gandalf mentioned the race of the kings. Wait, do you really mean Strider is one of the people of the old kings? I thought he was only a ranger. Come on, Frodo. Get with it. He's still slapping him upside the head verbally. They are the last men of the West. The Rangers are. Okay? So they keep talking, and Frodo finds out he's been asleep for days. Gandalf explains what they tried to do when they pierced him with the knife, etc., etc. Bottom of 222, he says there are some in Rivendell here, okay, who could fight the Dark Lord. They wouldn't win, but they could put up a good fight. Lords of the Eldar from beyond the furthest seas, they do not fear the ring race, for those who have dwelt in the Blessed Realm live at once in both worlds. The Blessed Realm is Valinor, where the Valar live. Okay? But then Gandalf says, those who have lived there live simultaneously in both worlds. The basic law of physics is you cannot be in two places at once. Do the elves therefore violate the laws of physics? No, that's not what he's talking about. He means because they've dwelt there, reality for them comprises what? How does he put it? The seen and the unseen. They live here now, implying in this physical world, the seen world, and they live here now also where? In the unseen world. Okay? In other words, the seen world and the unseen world are the same world, the same place. Harry Potter is going to come to that same realization in book 5. It's going to blow his mind. He's going to go, what? Okay? I saw a white figure. The Shauna did not grow dim like the others. Was that Glorfindel? Yes. You saw him for a moment as he is upon the other side. Why did he see him like that?
Because he was fading.
And go one more step. He was going into that unseen world. If he had faded completely, if he were now to see Elrond or Glorfindel, it'd be like, put on the sunglasses because they're really bright. Compared to the Dark Riders, who are really, really dark. I mean, how do I put this? What happens if you look at the sun too long? You go blind, right? It burns your eyes. Why? Because it's too white. We don't have any, my skin, your shirt, the white of the book, they're not even close to that brightness of that white, right? Similarly, what's the opposite of that? A blackness that is so black, you can't make out anything in it. I guess the opposite of a parallel would be like a black hole that is so dense, not even light can escape it, because white is what? It's a function of light. Okay? He kind of says, yeah, now you get an idea of what the elf lords are like. Now you know why the Black Riders are kind of like, okay, step back a little bit. Okay? So they keep talking, and let's see here. 226, 227. We get Glorfindel described. We get Elrond described. We see the other people who have shown up. Okay, at Elrond's, we don't know why they've shown up, but they do. And let's see here. We get reintroduced to Bilbo finally, and in chapter 2, Council of Elrond. So Elrond, kind of welcomes everybody. He introduces them to Frodo, and then he points around and introduces everybody else, top of 240. There's a young dwarf sitting by Glowenside, Gimli. Beside Glorfindel, there's some other elf lords. Okay. There's a Legolas, an elf from the north, from Mirkwood. Okay. Boromir, a man from Gondor from the south. So they have the council begin. And who speaks first? Glowin. He talks about messengers have come from Mordor seeking something for Sauron. A ring. A trifle. It's a mere nothing. But Sauron wants it. And if you can return it to him, then you will get your 7 dwarf rings back. They're kind of like, ooh. Because dwarves like things that are made. They're smiths. Okay? So he finishes his talk. Elrond says, 242. You're going to find all the answers you need to know in order to understand the purposes of Sauron. Notice, he doesn't say you're going to get all the answers to all the questions. You're going to find out what you need to know to understand what Sauron is about. Notice, it's implied. It's about more than just winning this trifle. Okay? And he finishes that paragraph. That is the doom that we must deem. What shall we do with the ring? Okay? That is the purpose for which you are called hither. Called, I say, though I have not called you to me, strangers from distant lands. You have come and are here met in this very nick of time, by chance. So I have this up here. As it may seem. Why does he say, as it may seem? Seem, I've got it up here somewhere, is a subjunctive verb. If somebody says, so-and-so seems like, what is that telling us about so-and-so?
They're not necessarily.
They're not. Seems means it appears that way. If I were to say, Donald Trump seems like a person well in command of his emotions and attitudes and everything, everybody would laugh me to my face. Because we know, whether you like Trump or not, we know that's not true. You call him something, and what's he going to do immediately? It's like bringing a gun to a knife fight. You bring a knife to Donald Trump, he's going to respond with a bazooka or a howitzer. I mean, he's going to eviscerate you. Okay, I was going to say on Twitter, but he can't do that anymore. You could say, so-and-so, I don't know, pick your bad person. Ted Bundy seemed like a really good date for the girls that he went out with. No, maybe for the first 5 minutes. Jeffrey Dahmer had a good taste in meat. No. He ate people, if you don't know. He was a serial killer who ate his victims, okay? It's a condition contrary to fact. So he's saying, it seems like chance. It wasn't. And that's what he makes clear. It is not so. Believe rather. Notice, this isn't a no. There's a difference between belief and knowledge. Okay? Believe, rather, that it is so ordered that we, who sit here around this big table, and no others, must now find counsel for the peril of the world. The fate of the world is in our hands. And guess what? It is so ordered. Does that mean fate? Because if it does mean fate, what can you not do about or with fate? You can't change it. No matter what, it's not going to change. All right? Or is it more like what Gandalf said to Frodo about Frodo's possession of the ring? Bilbo was meant to have it, and in that case, you were meant to have it. And that should be a comforting thought. And he's like, no, not. Elrond is saying the same thing. We were meant to all be here together. It's up to us to decide, okay? So, Elrond says, now everything about the rings is going to be made clear, and I'll start. And he talked about Sauron and the Rings of Power, and they're forging in the second age of the world long ago. And notice, some people knew his part of the story and a lot of people didn't. Okay? He finishes at Sauron's first defeat. And Frodo's like, pause, time out. You remember? I thought the fall of Gil-galad was a long age ago. Like over 3,000 years, actually. Elrond. Yeah, it was. My memory reaches back even to the Elder Days. The Elder Days is the first age of Middle-earth. The Elder Days is before the world was made round. How old does Elrond look? Not a day over 450. In Elvish years. Glorfindel looks young. And he's older than Elrond. We're going to meet Galadriel. She's older than Glorfindel. Okay? Círdan's the only one who's kind of described as looking a little long in the tooth and, a little old. So he talks about, I was there. I was there when Isildur cut the ring off Sauron's hand. A little bit of foreshadowing, by the way. He says, I was there when he claimed the ring, bottom of that page, as Wergild for my father and brother. Wergild is an Old English phrase, Old English, Anglo-Saxon, like from 500 to 1100 AD. Were, man, as in werewolf, man-wolf, okay? Gild, gold, man price. It's the price somebody would have to pay to a person that they've wronged by killing a member of that person's family. Okay? So if one of you killed my brother, I'd be able to go, give me the werewolf for my brother. And you'd have to, cough up some money. And if you didn't, guess what I could do? Without even having the law involved. Boom. Okay? If I went the law route, I'd offer you the opportunity to pay me. And there were set prices according to the level of society you're part of. Common peasant, with not much. King's son, you're going to pay through the nose. Okay? And maybe pay literally through the nose. All right? So, Boromir stands up, talks. He relates a vision that he had, a dream. But who else had that vision? Pages top of 246. His brother. Notice his brother isn't named here. And that vision came to his brother several times. We're told. On the eve of a sudden assault, a dream came to my brother in a troubled sleep. Afterwards, a like dream came oft to him again. Oft, that means many times. And once to me. Can we read anything into that? This dream came many times to his younger brother. It came once to him. Why does it keep going to the other brother? He's the one who's supposed to receive it. He's the one who is supposed to deliver it. But he's not. We don't find out until, Return of the King, I don't think. We don't find out till Return of the King why he's not the one to deliver it. Okay? So he recounts the poem from the vision. Aragorn stands up, throws the sword that was broken on the table, and says, here's the sword that was broken. Boromir, who are you? It's not like they have name tags. Who comes to Boromir's defense? Does Arwen go, oh, he's my beloved, my affianced, and we're going to marry? No. Does Gandalf stand up and say, he's been with me through thick and thin. We marched through Moria together. Blah, blah, blah. Nope. It's Elrond. Watch the films. Elrond and Aragorn are like oil and water in the film. They don't get along. Why? Because of this. They're playing upon the notion that Aragorn is solely kind of a modern day baron who's going to take away Elrond's little girl. Utter, I can't say the words. It's just nonsense. Elrond comes to his defense because there is no antagonism. He knows who Aragorn is, and Aragorn knows what he has to do before he can marry Arwen. He does have to do something. It's not that big. Just has to be named King of Gondor, which can only happen when Sauron is defeated. So you got to kill Satan, and then you can marry my daughter. Okay. Aragorn, son of Arathorn, descended from many fathers, but through many fathers, some Isildur, Elendil's son, blah, 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 blah. And Frodo's like, thank you, whoever means for me to have this thing. It's yours. Why does he say the ring belongs to Aragorn? Aragorn didn't make it. What did Aragorn's grandfather do? He cut it off Sauron's hand, because finger too. And then did what? He claimed it. It's mine. My precious, almost. So he's like, Isildur claimed it. It's his. It's a family heirloom. There's the sword here. Let me just put the ring next to the sword. You can pick them up both. I'll go back to the Shire. Okay? And Aragorn's like, no. It doesn't belong to either of us. Okay? So Gandalf says, bring it out, Frodo. Frodo brings out the ring. I always imagine he has to stand up on the table. Otherwise, he's kind of like this. And they can't see it. And look at Boromir's eyes. 247. They glint. One time in the entire novel that glint is used where it's not negative is with Tom Bombadil. When Frodo asks him, who the hell are you? And he goes, what? And gives his nice, wonderful, riddling answer. Okay? Why do his eyes glint?
He wants it.
Yeah. He wants it. Okay? So he says, so the doom of Minas Tirith is at hand. And Aragorn's like, let me teach you how to interpret literature properly. That's not what it said, dummy. He says, doom is at hand. Doesn't say anything about the doom of Minas Tirith. Doom might be what? See, doom and deem, that line that's in the... When Elrond said, we must deem the doom. Deem means to judge. Doom is the judgment. Okay? Judgment is at hand. Judgment for who? Well, it could be judgment for a lot of people. So, he finishes, Aragorn does, and says, the sword that was broken, Elendil's sword that broke when he fell on it, okay, he says it's going to be reforged. Do you want me to come back to Minas Tirith? Do you want the house of Elendil to return? What's he getting at? What's he really mean? What would the modern equivalent, what would our real world equivalent be to this sword? Is there one? There is, but it was never broken. It's Excalibur, Arthur's sword. Okay? Put yourself in the British royal house. You're Prince Charles. You're in your upper 70s, and you're still living under Mama's skirt because the old bat won't die. She just keeps on going. You want to be king. And some upstart shows up and says, by the way, I'm back. Yeah, well, who are you? And the person says, and has the proof, I'm King Arthur's great grandson. And here's Excalibur. And the radiocarbon date, something on it, and they're like, damn, it really is Excalibur. And they find DNA, and it really is King Arthur's great. What does that do to the whole House of Windsor? They're not ultimately really English anyways. They're adopted Germans for the most part. That's the option being given to Boromir. Because what is Boromir? He's next in line for the stewardship of Gondor. Compared to a king, what is a steward? Here, hold the door, please. That's what a steward is. Take my shoes off, please. Prepare my dinner, please. It's a person who holds the place of. Doesn't have the real power and authority. It's like vice president. I don't care what political party. No vice president, how do I put this? Every vice president has the job of vice presidency for what purpose? There's only one ultimately spelled out by the Congress. I know they have something to do with counting, the electoral votes and all that kind of stuff, but that's all. What's the real purpose? To step into the presidency if something happens to the president. That's it. All the other stuff is just window dressing. Okay? Boromir, bottom of 247. I was not sent to beg any boon. I wasn't here to sit here to beg any reward or any, anything that would help us. What the emphasis is on what word? Beg. It's like, I'm Boromir. I don't beg. But, if the sword that was broken can't come back, if Excalibur was real and it could arrive in Westminster, okay, well, we won't say no. Okay? So, Bilbo stands up, offers a nice little poem. Everybody kind of smiles at him because he's old and senile, and they're just like, let the little Alzheimer's patient, go sit down. And Aragorn shows his class. Top of the next page. Little do I resemble the figures of Elendil and Isildur as I stand carven in their majesty in the halls of Denethor. Okay, what is that telling us? I've been there. I know what those look like. Do you remember what Boromir said when he first, I marched 110 leagues all by myself to get here. Well, Aragorn's going to say, that's nothing. It's like driving from here to the, liquor store across the street on Main Street compared to what I've done. I've been from here to California and back numerous times on my feet compared to what you've done. That's when he says, I've been into the far countries of Rhûn and Harad. Look at the map in your book. It's, the Shire's over here. They're at Rivendell, which is like here. Rhûn is way the hell over here, and Harad is down here. And Boromir's gone from here to up here. Once. Aragorn implies, and I've done this more than once. In fact, down here in Harad, he says, the stars are different. And as one of my students pointed out in my first class, what does that kind of mean? He's been across the equator. You go across the equator, what do you no longer see in the sky? Big Dipper, Little Dipper, Polaris. You now see the Southern Cross. Okay? So don't talk to me about, you're big long. But he doesn't put it in that kind of language. He says, I get it. I don't look like them. I'm not Elendil. I'm not Isildur. I'm the heir. Okay? So then he goes on and gives this speech. And he says, Gondor's been a stalwart. It's been great defender. Yay. Everybody give a round of applause for Gondor. And then he says, middle of that paragraph, about 2/3 of the way down. You know little of the lands beyond your bounds. Peace and freedom, do you say? The North would have known them little but for us. Fear would have destroyed them. When dark things come from the houseless hills or creep from sunless woods, they fly from us. That is, these dark things. Notice he doesn't name them. If they were orcs, he'd probably say orcs. These things are nameless evils. What roads would any dare to tread? What safety would there be in quiet lands or in the homes of simple men at night if the Dunedain were asleep or all gone into the grave? Think about that. He's saying people go to sleep at night totally unaware that they can go to sleep at night because we're standing watch. And yet less thanks have we than you. Travelers scowl at us. Countrymen give us scornful names. Strider I am to one fat man, Barrow and Butterbur, who lives within a day's march of foes that would freeze his heart or lay his little town in ruin if he were not guarded ceaselessly. Yet we would not have it otherwise. If simple folk are free from care and fear, simple they will be, and we must be secret to keep them so. Simple folk, the people of Bree, he says, are free from what? From care and fear. And guess what? That's what makes them simple. They don't have to deal with the problems of the world out there. Why? Because the world is kept out there. Evil is kept at bay. Why? Because we're standing here, swords, facing the evil. We're not facing Bree. It says, and you know what? They should be kept that way. Now, there's going to be characters in the Harry Potter novels who are going to argue, no, people ought to know about all these kinds of things. Hermione, for example, she's going to try to set up the house elves into this uprising against, the malevolent power of Dumbledore. Why? Because they're enslaved and all this kind of stuff. What does Rowling do with that whole theme? She drops it entirely. For one reason. The house elves don't see themselves as being enslaved. They see themselves as fulfilling their word I had up here on the board the other day, their end, their purpose. Okay? So, long story short, Gandalf gives his story, tells about being captured by Saruman, tells us what Saruman offered him. We can join with Sauron, and maybe after many, 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 many long years, we can turn Sauron. We can make Sauron nice. Okay? And Gandalf's like, come on, man. I'm going to make a comment about what this means in just a minute. He says, okay. That won't work out. What about we join together? I get the ring Monday, Wednesday, Friday. You get the ring Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, and we lock it up on Sunday. Not going to work. So what's the thing about we can turn Sauron? MFN, most favored nation, trading status. Anybody know what that is or was? We don't have it anymore. Or at least, we don't have it with the country that there used to be annual fights in Congress, going from at least the 80s up into the George W. Bush administration. Annually, Congress had to approve most favored nation trading status for China. Okay? Why would Congress want to give China most favored nation trading status? Because China was, one, an economic competitor, and two, producing a whole hell of a lot of stuff that we import, buy very cheaply. Because it costs much, much less to produce things in China than it does here. Why? Because we have unions. And even without the unions, most companies in the U.S. tend to pay a quote-unquote decent wage. In China, no. A lot of stuff was made by literal slave prison labor. That's why, very, very cheap to produce. So we had to do this. Well, most favored nation trading status, one of the reasons the administration, doesn't matter which party, both parties did it, both parties argued strongly for it, said was, the only way we're going to get China to become more like us is if we engage in trade with them, and we can gently try to sway them to our point of view. I don't mean full-bore capitalism. We don't have full-bore capitalism. I mean to be nicer to their people, to be more humanitarian. Another way of putting that is to be more human. Did it do any good? I would argue June 4th, 1989, pretty much showed. Didn't do a lick of good. That was the uprising in Tiananmen Square when the Chinese PLA sent in the army and wiped them all out. Okay? We no longer have that. Why? Because China is now in the World Trade Organization. It wasn't in the WTO during that time. So we were taking the exact same logic that's almost in Sauron, that Saruman uses and trying to use it. We did the same thing with the Soviet Union, Russia, after the Soviet Union fell. Where are we today? Okay. So, Gandalf escapes. Saruman, we find out, has a coat of many colors. He's not Joseph with the amazing Technicolor coat, but it's white, etc. And Gandalf talks about, wisdom and breaking white, etc. We get to the end of the chapter. Well, just before that, 265. Aristor suggests, why should we call Tom Bombadil? Gandalf says he wouldn't have come. Okay, fine. Can't we send the ring to him? I mean, he has a power over it. And Gandalf says, no. It's more like the ring has no power over him. Why? He is his own master. I mean, what does that mean, he is his own master? Who are you? Alone, yourself, nameless. If you remember the other day, I said Tom Bombadil does not depend from anything else. He doesn't hang from anything else. I think that kind of gives maybe some idea of who/what he is, but it's not clear. Tolkien never specifies. Okay? So they finally come to the decision, we've got to destroy the ring. Even though Boromir doesn't want to do that. Boromir's like, hey, take the ring. Use it. We could win. Elrond's like, I'm not strong enough. Gandalf's not me. None of the other elves. Boromir's like, I can. They're like, no, you can't. So Frodo finally offers to take the ring. Page 270. Notice, they're talking about the messengers that will be sent with the ring. And then they're like, who's gonna take the ring? And Frodo finally says, I will take the ring, though I do not know the way. And Elrond says, I think it's appointed for you. Why? Well, it was appointed for Bilbo to find the ring. It was appointed for Bilbo to pass the ring on to Frodo. And Elrond says, if you can't find a way, nobody will. It's not the trite little logoria that proceeds out of Galadriel's mouth in the film. This is the time for the little people to rise up and overthrow the powers of the great. It's not what he says. So, they've got to come up with people to go with them. Who's going to go? This group. Why are these two last?
They weren't supposed to go.
Yeah, Frodo's going, so you know who's going. Sam, you can't pick him apart. Gandalf, because, he's the one moving the chess pieces seemingly. Aragorn, intimately tied up with the fate of the ring. Gimli, why? All-powerful dwarf? No, dwarf, representing the dwarves. Boromir, Gondor's on the way, so we'll drop him off at the doorstep. Legolas, represent the elves. And then Merry and Pippin. What does Elrond want to do with Merry and Pippin?
Take it back.
He wants to send him back to the Shire. And Gandalf says, trust to friendship rather than strength. He's like, okay, we'll send Merry. Why not Pippin? Louder?
Too young.
Too young. Too flighty. Too airheady. Why else? Go back to the reason he wanted to send them both. Why does he want to send Pippin back to the Shire? Warning. He wants the Shire to be prepared. Jump to the chapter, The Scouring of the Shire, which is not quite, it's like the second, third, to the last chapter of the entire novel. Everything that happens in the shiring of the Shire, or the scouring of the Shire, happens because the Shire doesn't get warned. Okay? But a lot of stuff also happens because Pippin goes. One of the major eucatastrophes of the novel happens because Pippin is on this trip. And it happens to Gandalf, who is the one who argued Pippin should go too. Okay? So they leave. We're going to go south. Skipping a whole bunch. Journey in the Dark, chapter 4. They try to go over the top of Mount Caradhras, or through a pass. They've got to go over this mountain pass to make their way down, and they can't. The mountain won't let them. It's not just an ordinary freaky storm. Okay? So they decide to go under the mountain, through the mines of Moria. Gimli's like, yes. It's his homeland. It's the dwarves' ancestral kingdom. But Aragorn doesn't want to go through the mines of Moria. And Frodo's like, if Aragorn doesn't want to go through the mines of Moria, I sure as hell don't want to go through there either. But he doesn't want to go through because of fear for himself. Who does he warn? Gandalf. He says, beware. I say to you, Gandalf the Grey, beware the mines of Moria. Okay? So they get to the doors of Durin, and there's Elvish script on there. It says, say friend and enter. And Gandalf's trying to figure out what it means, because it's a riddle. And then it finally hits him. No, it just says, say friend in Elvish, and the door's open. So he says, Melon, and the door's open. They go in. Frodo almost gets captured by this thing. I'm not going to talk about that. It's interesting. Out of all the people, it's Frodo that the thing with the tentacle catches him. So they go in. They find, Balin's tomb. But before they do, the first night, they go into this big room, and they're bunking down for the night. And there's a well. Pippin goes up to the well, as I would have done. Pippin's not the only fool. He goes up to the well, picks up a rock. He doesn't knock a skeleton in like in the movie, like, ooh, that's more scary. You know, he picks up a rock and goes, 1001, 1002, 1003. And he just counts. And it takes a long time, and then we hear a click. And Gandalf hears the echo of the plank and says, fool of a took. Next time, throw yourself in and be done with. And then he gives him first watch, as punishment. What happens almost immediately once we hear the plunk? And it's very rhythmic. And Gimli goes, that's a hammer if I've ever heard one. Yes. Damn it. We should have kept him asleep. Okay? So, they get ambushed. They find Balin's tomb. They read what's called the Black Book of Mazerpol, which is Balin's, kind of diary of how they did after, they arrived back there, and we find out Balin's dead. You can go to Marquette University, go to the Tolkien Archives, which is where all the Lord of the Rings material, not the Silmarillion stuff, just the Lord of the Rings, all the Lord of the Rings manuscript material is at the Tolkien Archive at Marquette University. They bought it from Tolkien in the late 50s for like 10 grand. Pounds, 10,000 pounds. Because he had a huge tax bill to pay because of the Lord of the Rings. Okay? Got it for a steal. I mean, they just stole it blind. And that book is there. Because Tolkien made mock-ups of all the books that he talks about. And it's torn and burned pages and blood splattered like he dripped a little blood and smeared it. Really. And they get attacked. Okay? Gandalf has to put a spell on the door, skipping a bunch, as they flee in the chapter Bridge of Khazad-dum. He puts a spell on the door. Something puts a counter spell on the door. And Gandalf speaks a word of command, page 329. Okay? He gets down to the others, 327, to the bridge of Khazad-dum, and he says, I had to utter a word of command, and I'm tired, man, I'm wasted. He gets down to the bridge of Khazad-dum, and the orcs are saying the word for fire. And suddenly this thing shows up, and we get Legolas, top of 330, a Balrog. A Balrog is come. Gimli, Durin's Bane. Do we know what a Balrog is? Nope, have no idea. Okay? I'm going to tell you. It's one of these. It's one of these. It's a lower level supernatural being. These are like the Ainur, which become Valar when they enter into Arda, which is the universe. These are like the highest form of angelic beings. Okay? The Maiar are a secondary level. Okay? So Luthien's mother was one of these. Right? The Balrog is one of these. Sauron is one of these. And I'm going to give something away. Gandalf is one of these. Why do I give that away? Because Gandalf tells him, I know it's 11:05, you cannot pass, I am a servant of the secret fire. The secret fire dwells out of time with Iluvatar. Gandalf says, I am a servant of that. You can't be a servant of that and just, be some old guy walking around with a stick. All right? So he destroys the Balrog. Well, not quite. He says you cannot pass, destroys the pass. The Balrog takes him down, and they escape. Gandalf's last words, fly, fly, you fools. Do not get on the internet and try to figure out what that means. Because some jackass, I'll go ahead and say it, some jackass or more have suggested that is Gandalf telling them, when you leave Moria, shoot up a flare for the eagles, and Gwaihir the Windlord and his eagle friends will come, take you on their backs, and they can fly you to Mordor. And then you can just drop the ring in Mount Doom. What does fly mean here? It doesn't mean grow wings. It means run. That's what it means. Okay, when we pick up on whatever day, today's Tuesday? On Thursday, chapter 7, the Mirror of Galadriel. That's where we're going to be. Don't forget the quiz. That's due tomorrow night, I believe. Some of you have already taken it.